It is now my distinct honor and privilege to introduce the President of the American College of Radiology, Bibb Allen, Jr. One of the benefits of my position is getting the opportunity to meet some remarkable people. One notable couple is Bibb and Leslie Allen. Dr. Allen has served 6 years as a counselor, 4 years as a member of the Council Steering Committee, and 9 years on the ACR Board of Chancellors, during which time he served as a vice chair and chair. Bibb is a past president of the Alabama Academy of Radiology and received their silver medal in 2005. He has chaired the ACR commissions on economics, government relations, international outreach, and membership and communications, and served on numerous ACR commissions and committees. He is a fellow of the American College of Radiology and in 2012, recipient of the ACR Thorworth Award for Economics. I also, along with the board and the Council Steering Committee, have had the privilege of hearing the gridiron exploits of Bibb's alma mater, the Alabama Crimson Tide. Now, as he rotates off the board and I potentially rotate on, things are going to change at the board. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Allen to the podium to deliver this address.
Ooh, can I say go dogs? I don't know if I can do it or not. Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Vice Speaker, members of the ACR Council, fellow members, colleagues, friends, and guests. It is a real honor for me to speak to you today as your ACR president, and I welcome you all to ACR 2017. Thank you so much for being here today. Not only has it been a great honor for me to serve as your president this past year, I am truly grateful for the trust all of you have placed in me over the years to serve as one of our college leaders. Our changing healthcare environment, political polarization in Washington, and economic threats to our practices have all created tumultuous times for our specialty. And I frequently wondered why someone like me, a radiologist in a small community practice, at a relatively small hospital in a relatively small state, would ever be considered for any of the offices that I've ever held for the college. How could I ever understand the challenges facing practices different than mine? Our organization embodies a truly diverse range of practice types. We not only represent small independent practices, but also large academic practices. Radiologists practicing in multi-specialty clinic, those employed by their hospitals, and those employed by large national radiology groups. And every issue we face as an organization can potentially have different impact on each of these practice types. But the common thread for our college leaders, no matter what the issue, has always been our patients. Because once we put our patients first, with the desire that every patient is treated just as we would our friends or family, then our decision-making becomes a lot easier. Just over 10 years ago, Mickey Gibberto reminded us in his 2006 presidential address that a profession demands much more than most traditional jobs. He told us that a profession's principal duty is not to ourselves, but to those who we serve. And as physicians, this principal duty is to our patients. It's why we do what we do. It's what sets us apart, our profession, from other trades and vocations. And you, the members of the ACR Council, have set policy for our organization that has allowed the ACR to do the things that are helping radiologists put our patients first. And while recognizing a duty to our patients has been a guiding principle for our organization over the years, it also applies to the decisions we make every day in our practices. And while there are, of course, many differences in practices across the country, if we make decisions that are in the best interest of our patients, we can assure that we have made the right decision. When our patients are at the center of what we do, our decisions become obvious, and in the end, we're better off because of the value patient-focused decision-making brings to our practices. So whether it's in a radiology organization or a radiology practice, in an academic center or a small community hospital, on Fifth Avenue or on Main Street in Medical America, keeping our patients at the center of what we do is a principal strategy for our organizations and practices is key for radiologists to demonstrate their value in healthcare, and I firmly believe letting what's best for our patients guide our decision-making will ensure a bright future for our practices and our specialty, because using our knowledge and our tools to improve the health and care of our patients is our primary goal. When the ACR Board of Chancellors was in the process of updating our organization's strategic plan, we conducted fairly extensive research amongst radiologists and found that the vast majority of our members see the ACR as a career partner. And it was this partnership theme that molded the ACR's core purpose: to serve patients and society by empowering members to advance the practice, science, and professions of radiological care, essentially defining an external environment and then developing the tools that empower radiological professionals to create our own value in our health systems and for our patients, basically doing the things for members that they would be unable to do for themselves. So how has the ACR been able to achieve these goals in the past, and how can we continue to do it in the future? Well, to explain how we can accomplish this mission, I'm going to use an old and somewhat tired cliche: staying ahead of the curve. Now, cliches, idioms, sayings are very important to us in the South, and we learn them from our families. And as many of you know, I am from Alabama, a small state where our most famous last words are, "Hey, y'all, watch this." Right. So, notwithstanding Harper Lee's To Kill a Mockingbird, Alabama's not usually known for our literary scholars. And in the modern era, I suspect our most famous, or perhaps infamous poet has been Jimmy Buffett. That's right. So one of Jimmy's earliest songs was titled Cliches. Written in 1975, Jimmy says, "Cliches are good ways to say what you mean and mean what you say." And so, with that in mind, I'm going to embrace staying ahead of the curve as one of the ways to understand why radiologists in the college have been successful over the years in promoting policies and developing tools that help all of us take better care of our patients. But it's not as simple as you might think. Now, most of us generally understand the phrase staying ahead of the curve. We take it to mean being able to anticipate the latest developments in order to be well positioned when change occurs. But as I did more research on the origin of the phrase, I found a discussion on the power curve in aviation, which some suggest is the actual source of the expressions behind the curve and ahead of the curve. The complexities of the aviation power curve, believe me, are beyond my ability to explain. But I learned several lessons from my research. So the power curve defines the airspeed at which an airplane is most efficient. And a pilot in that is not there is behind the curve and risks stalling with limited options in case of trouble. On the other hand, when the pilot is ahead of the curve, the aircraft does much better and is more efficient. But it turns out staying ahead of the curve is a very fragile place to be, because when a plane gets too far ahead of the curve, the fuel consumption increases, energy decreases, and that gets the pilot behind the curve in short order. So why did I bore you with all that? Well, it's to emphasize that in radiology organizations and in our practices, we have to be conscious of our environment and proactive in our thinking and actions, or we will surely fall behind the curve. Yet if we get too far out in front of the curve, our energy becomes wasted and our actions less impactful or even counterproductive. Ahead of the curve is indeed a fragile place, and being there requires constant vigilance to stay in the sweet spot where proactive thinking translates into actions that best serve our patients and increase the value that we as radiology professionals provide. The ACR, I believe, has a long history of keeping our profession ahead of the curve. 2 years ago, Paul Ellenbogen, in his presidential address, took us back to the 1960s and 1980s, where on 2 different occasions, CMS, then called the Healthcare Finance Administration, had seriously considered lumping the payments to hospital-based physicians, including radiologists, in with the payments to hospitals, thus mandating all radiologists become employees of the hospital. Without the proactive efforts of the college to keep radiologist payment methods the same as those for other physicians, The independent practice of radiology might have been lost, and with it, much of the innovation that has fueled the development of our specialty, which of course in turn has exponentially improved the care we provide our patients. At the same time, we now recognize that in order to be more relevant and valuable to our patients, radiologists must also be able to partner with their health systems and referring physicians to provide cohesive team-based care. Ahead of the curve is a fragile place to be. Developing these partnerships while maintaining our independence is a balancing act that requires constant vigilance and fine-tuning. But whether it's more centralized control of healthcare dollars or the influx of entrepreneurial forces in the marketplace, radiology practices, I believe, are seeing more pressure to give up their independence. For many, consolidation has not resulted in an increase in team-based care or increasing our value to our health systems. Many times, in order to maximize revenue, consolidation puts even more pressure on radiologists to focus only on imaging interpretation, further isolating them from the clinical team with little opportunity to provide value beyond generating imaging reports. On the other hand, being a part of teams and supporting our health systems doesn't have to mean we have to give up our independence. For many community practices, independence often means being able to take the time without fear of reprisal from the bean counters to do the things that make radiologists valuable far beyond just image interpretation. Unfortunately, many radiologists in small practices have told me that they're going to have to consolidate because they're not going to be able to keep up with the mandates set out in the macro legislation. And so I hope that all of you will take the word back to your practices and states that the ACR has developed tools such as the Qualified Clinical Data Registries to give practices of all sizes an opportunity to have the same reporting efficiencies as larger practices. And the ACR is committed to being your partner in demonstrating the value you are providing every day in your practices to CMS, our health systems, and the public. So because staying ahead of the curve is indeed fragile, the decisions we make to help us stay there will undoubtedly cause some angst. Patient-focused decision-making can, at times, seem counterintuitive to improving our practices and to our bottom line. For the college, one such example has been the ACR appropriateness criteria and our clinical decision support program for our referring physicians. Why would radiologists and our national organizations support tools that might decrease the volume of what we do? Even before the advent of the radiology and benefit management companies and prior authorization for imaging studies, the ACR placed a flag in the sand saying that radiologists can and will lead physicians in the appropriate use of diagnostic imaging studies. Recall that the ACR's appropriateness criteria began back in 1993, when then ACR Board Chair K.K. Wallace went to the House Ways and Means Committee and said, the ACR is ready to create guidelines for radiology to eliminate inappropriate use of radiologic services. Now think about that. Nearly 25 years ago, radiologists were leading other physicians toward providing value-based care for our patients. But when you're ahead of the curve, sometimes you have to be patient while others decide to follow along, and so it was for the appropriateness criteria. Long before we could develop a delivery tool to put decision support at the point of care, the RBMs, mostly motivated by profits and not for patients, selectively used their own black box versions of the ACR appropriateness criteria to create binary prior authorization programs rather than systems that truly help referring physicians request the most appropriate study. As prior authorization has shown, programs around radiology services that are not strongly influenced by radiologists almost never turn out in the best interest of patients. So the college remained patient, and as technology has caught up with our desire to deliver clinical decision support to the point of care, our ACR AC through ACR Select are now integrated into the electronic health record systems of all of the major vendors. The college's support for the PAMA legislation requiring consultation of decision support systems for outpatient advanced imaging studies once again demonstrated that although radiologists might stand to lose financially, we can always be counted on to support what's in the best interest of our patients. Another example of the fragility of being ahead of the curve has been the saga of Medicare payment policies for imaging services. With the advent of Medicare's resource-based relative value scale, the RBRVS, and the relative value unit system for physician services, once again, proactive thinking and actions by the college in the early 1990s put radiologists ahead of the curve. While many other medical specialties were direly opposed, the ACR was developing a radiology-specific relative value system and working transparently with CMS and the Harvard School of Public Health to crosswalk our system into the fledgling RBRVS. It was radiologists, not college professors and government bureaucrats, who were able to get it right and help policymakers make sense of radiology payments fit in with the rest of medicine. And over the ensuing 35 years, with the work and diligence of innumerable ACR volunteers and staff, the value of our professional services has held up fairly well against the onslaughts from other physicians groups and CMS itself. But being ahead of the curve is fragile. Growth in the use of radiology services helped escalate costs in the early 2000s, and as such, policymakers imposed a series of draconian decreases to payments for imaging services. Although primarily technical, the value of our professional work was also affected through CPT code bundling and the multiple procedure payment reduction. We needed a different story to tell Congress, CMS, and our colleagues, a story that shows radiologists can be part of the solutions, not part of the problem. So 5 years ago, we began developing our Imaging 3.0 roadmap and toolkit to demonstrate how radiologists bring value to our patients and our healthcare system beyond interpretations. So as we move from the past into the present, I want to expand on radiologists providing value beyond imaging interpretation and some of the effects of the ACR's Imaging 3.0 initiative. First of all, I want to thank all of you, the members of the council, and truly all radiologists, for allowing your organization to highlight the importance of a culture that enhances the value radiologists provide when we also focus on the non-interpretive aspects of imaging care. By providing a structured roadmap of the value we create at each step of imaging care, from when imaging is first considered until patients fully understand their results and our recommendations, we define specific points in the chain where tools can be developed that allow radiologists to increase our value beyond interpretations. While clinical decision support for our referring physician is one of the key ways radiologists are adding value, recent advances in decision support for radiologists, tools for enhanced communications with our patients and referring physicians are all coming online. Having this structure allows the radiologists and the college to define the measures and the pathways for reporting in the MIPS that make sense for radiologists and our patients. As I'm sure you will hear all week, our efforts in patient-focused, value-added care have not been lost on policymakers, CMS, patient advocacy groups, or even our physician colleagues. Once again, the work of radiologists in the college is helping us stay ahead of the curve. Our Commission on Patient and Family-Centered Care is already providing a way for radiologists to be seen as leaders in the medical community and is providing us with a blueprint of how a patient-focused culture in our practices can increase the value we provide our patients. But our early success shows once again being ahead of the curve is a fragile place to be. Although we have the map, we still have to get the message and tools in the hands of radiologists in the trenches so they will incorporate value-added strategies into their practices. Only then will we be able to demonstrate our full value to policymakers with improved outcomes for patients. And if we can't deliver on this promise, we risk slipping behind the curve again. So it is incumbent on all of us to make sure that we walk the talk in our commitment to patient-focused, value-based care. So finally, I would be remiss if we didn't take a few minutes to look to the future and the next big opportunity for our specialty: artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence will undoubtedly provide many avenues for us to improve our care to patients. But once again, our specialty and practices may have to pivot a bit in order to incorporate these new tools. These advances in data science will not come without trepidation for radiologists. My goodness, if we were to believe the forecasts of Zeke Emanuel or even former President Obama, artificial intelligence could be the end of radiology. We might as well close up our training programs and let the machines roar because they will be doing our jobs in short order. Now, is that a realistic scenario? Well, I don't think so, and I don't think any of you should either. However, we must be aware that as developers of artificial intelligence look for applications in medicine, image analysis, algorithms for disease detection, and others that might affect us will be at the forefront in all specialties. And of course, there's nothing more likely to cause trepidation amongst radiologists than suggesting a machine might be able to do any part of our interpretive work. At the same time, we have to ask ourselves, would robot radiologists be what's best for our patients? Now, I suppose it depends on whether or not you believe radiologists provide value beyond imaging interpretation. If you believe our value stems from interpretation alone, it is possible that decades from now, algorithms could be developed that are robust enough to detect and characterize many diseases as well as we do. But if you believe, as I do, that radiologists can provide much more value to our patients than just image interpretation, then we are uniquely positioned to bring advances in data science to our healthcare teams by becoming the managers, integrators, and communicators of patients' digital information. Data mining using artificial intelligence will not be limited to our patients' images alone. It will include data from health records, pathology, personal devices, genomic testing, and more, producing an explosion of information about our patients' health, all ready to be integrated into our patients' care. Imaging will continue to be a mainstay in medical practice, and if radiologists are ready to lead the incorporation of those data into our imaging encounters with patients, the use of artificial intelligence can only increase the value we are able to provide, not diminish it. Advances in artificial intelligence and its applications in healthcare are inevitable. The technology will develop, and we will not be able to stop it, nor, by the way, should we want to. Any attempt to obstruct its development will be counterproductive because if we are not involved at the beginning, we risk being leapfrogged and cajoled into accepting technology that is not optimized to benefit patient care or the role of radiologists. I firmly believe that our patients will benefit most if radiologists and the ACR are playing a leading role in the implementation of artificial intelligence in medical imaging. I cannot imagine the implementation of artificial intelligence in medical imaging without radiologists. Who better than us to take a leading role in defining use cases, protecting our patients' safety, ensuring the algorithms that are developed are valid, setting standards for interoperability, and developing tools for implementing artificial intelligence in clinical practice. Our role should be to ensure artificial intelligence is implemented in ways that enhance our work and expand our diagnostic and clinical capabilities so radiologists, not the machines, are delivering more value to our patients and increasing our relevance to the healthcare system. So I'll leave you with a real-world scenario of why radiologists in the college need to be at the forefront of implementing AI into our practices. I was discussing the use of artificial intelligence in radiology with my son-in-law, who is a neurosurgery resident, a few weeks ago. We were discussing a potential algorithm that could detect intracranial hemorrhage and potentially move these critical cases higher on our work lists or even find subtle hemorrhage that a radiologist might miss. His response to that was, "Bibb, do we really need to detect more intracranial hemorrhage?" See, you thought about it faster than I did. I thought about it for a minute, but quickly realized what he was talking about. Imagine years from now, Mrs. Jones comes to an emergency department in rural Alabama after a fall at home. So she's neurologically intact, but had a period where she was briefly disoriented. So a CT scan was obtained. Now, artificial intelligence by then has become really good at detecting intracranial hemorrhage and is being used in many rural hospitals, so cases with significant findings can be flagged and moved to the top of the list if there's no on-site radiologist. The algorithm detects a 3-pixel width subdural hematoma, a finding that we know might often be overlooked by many radiologists, perhaps because we didn't see it, or perhaps we were worried about it, but thought it was artifact, and even if it was real, it wouldn't be significant anyway. And if a radiologist interprets the examination and overlooks the finding, the patient goes home, most likely does well, with no additional health care costs. Now, if a radiologist is not involved, and only the ED position, then the importance of the finding is immediately escalated. The patient is transferred, perhaps by helicopter, to a tertiary care center, observation, and no doubt more imaging. 24 hours later, the patient is fine, discharged, but ends up with several clinic visits and perhaps even more imaging to be sure the clot resolves. So I ask you, without a radiologist, would artificial intelligence really have helped Mrs. Jones? Do AI developers, some of whose objective might just be to beat the radiologist, understand the dilemmas and the ethics and all these other aspects of overdetection? This is just one of a host of reasons, I believe, that radiologists need to be involved from the beginning to guide developers in these issues that may not be intuitive to a pure data scientist. And just one of the reasons the college believes that radiologists must be involved in artificial intelligence applications from the beginning. For radiologists to own the implementation of artificial intelligence in the future, we must be part of the present. We are medicine's data scientists. We must play a leadership role for all of medicine to ensure artificial intelligence in all specialties benefits our patients. Our Data Science Institute will be a flag in the sand on behalf of radiologists in the imaging community for the good of our patients. We should never characterize the introduction of artificial intelligence into radiological practice as machines versus radiologists, but rather as radiologists working with machines to add artificial intelligence algorithms to our armamentarium of tools that will benefit our patients more than radiologists alone and much, much more than machines instead of radiologists. In conclusion, I believe what has worked for our specialty in the past will work for our specialty in the future. If we always let what's in the best interest of our patients guide our strategic decision-making, our college and our practices will always be able to stay ahead of the curve. But as we have seen, staying ahead of the curve is a fragile place that requires constant vigilance and relies on our ability to adapt and embrace the opportunities that come our way. You know you're in the right place when your decisions, whether they are for your organization or for your practices, feel, as my children would say, a bit edgy. That's the place we want to be, just ahead of the curve. So thank you all very much. It has been a remarkable ride for me, and I hope that at least a few of the things we have done have justified the trust you've placed in me. It would not have been possible without the support of my partners back home who helped me find the time to serve the college over the years. I'd also like to thank the members of the Alabama Academy of Radiology, our ACR chapter, for all their support. The wonderful people I've worked with and had the privilege to work with on the board and council steering committee who have shared their counsel and allowed me to promote their ideas are far too numerous to name, but include Harvey Neiman, John Patty, Paul Ellenbogen, Geraldine McGinty, Jim Brink, and of course Bill Thorworth. Service to organized medicine would not be possible for any of us without the support of our families, mine included. My daughters Sarah, Emily, and Leslie are here, along with husband Paul, friend Dan, and grandchild Little Bibb. I thank that, I thank them for their support and sacrifices over the years. And then finally, I have to thank Leslie. I think that we had only been married a year or two when I attended my first ACR meeting, and that was over 30 years ago. Ever since, I can't remember a time when our schedule and our vacation didn't include ACR commitments. She's been a total trooper, my support mechanism, and reality checker. Thank you, Leslie. A couple of people aren't here today, my mom and dad. My father was a lawyer and a relentless volunteer for his profession. He taught me that the best way to succeed in a professional organization is to never say no. And then there's my 92-year-old mother who is incredibly disappointed she is too ill to be here today. She's been the rock of our family and a source of inspiration for me. She's also a source of some of my cliches and saying, and right now she'd be saying, never miss an opportunity to shut up. So, Mom, I'm going to stop now, and thanks again for all of your support.